What is up? It is a December 21st edition of the Splash Ag podcast. Today I'm joined once again by Andrew. I've had him on in the past, breaking down NBA playoffs, NBA finals, redrafts, etc. And having him back on again because tomorrow is the start of the 2020-21 NBA season. It's pretty crazy given that, the finals were just 2 months ago, but hey, it's a weird year. It's with strange times, obviously. So he and I were actually going to talk a little bit about some of the teams that we are excited to watch. Not necessarily like who we think is going to be good, but more so just kind of who are we going to be very entertained by? Kind of that quote league pass criteria. So without further ado, I'm joined by Andrew. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Just relaxing. School's over, so I'm just taking it easy.
That's good to hear. And so, you, it's a good time to be, done. It's a good time to, wrap up school and everything. Considering, like I said, NBA season starts tomorrow. My first question to you, and the way we'll structure this is we'll kind of go by we'll kind of go by different tiers of like, um, competitiveness per se. So I guess to start, of all the best teams in the NBA, which ones are you most looking forward to watching and why?
Yeah, that's a good question to start off. So, out of all contenders, I made like five teams for each one. So I'm just going to just list it. So for my contenders, I got the Nets, the Sixers, the Blazers, the Nuggets, and the Bucks. Uh, so just a quick rundown of each of them.
Yeah, just which I'll say this. I think so. You said the Nets, the Blazers, the Nuggets, the Sixers, and who was the fifth one?
The Bucks.
The Bucks. Okay, I want to hear why you're excited to watch the Bucks. Only because, um, I think that's a little less obvious with regards to their quote, like, kind of like league pass, um, their league pass credentials. I'm curious, like, what do you think makes the Bucks league pass this year?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we know they're going to dominate the regular season. Obviously, probably finish first in the East again. And yeah, I think for the Bucks, maybe the playoffs is where I guess people are more closely watching them. But for me, I think there are among my contenders to watch just because I want to see how Drew Holiday fits in with Middleton and Giannis, just to see I guess now Holiday's on a bigger spotlight. He goes from like a Pelicans team where he had like two playoff trips, I think, and then to now with the Bucks who are perennial contenders. So I want to see how he meshes on a title contending team, and see how much of an upgrade he is over Eric Bledsoe. And he also made some other moves too. I think they kind of went added some shooting to their bench. I got Augustine, Bobby Portis, and I think Torrey Craig was a very underrated signing for them. I think
Yep.
he's a very good defensive wing from the Nuggets. So the Bucks, they made some pretty big changes this offseason. I want to see how his pieces gel in the court. I just want to see how Mike Budenholzer, maybe I don't know if he make adjustments or not because that's not his team, but I want to see how he fits those pieces together. And lastly, just obviously people talk about how Giannis just has a 3-point shot, but I want to see him add some like more creativity in the paint. What I mean is like not just like hard drives to the rim, but maybe adding some post moves, adding some like mid range like post touch, because I think that's something that it's easier for him to build on than adding a 3-point shot. So I'm intrigued to see them and see what kind of changes they made.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with you. Like, I would love to. Not, I'm not. I don't. I think it's really easy to just jump and yell, "Hey, Giannis needs to add a 3-point shot." But I think like if he had a little more just diversity in the arsenal, like that would open up so much for him because he's got incredible. He's obviously so incredibly good as he is already. But okay, I hear a lot of what you're saying about the Bucks. I just wonder if two things. One, I wonder if maybe the fact that the Bucks have dominated the regular season, if people are now kind of waiting, like if they're kind of now on that timeline of like, hey, we just want to see what you do in the playoffs, right? Every great team eventually reaches that point where you kind of don't you're not as invested in the regular season, but The other point that I think makes them quote unquote maybe not league pass, at least in my book, is that, like you said, they've been the best regular season team the last 2 years. I feel like especially in a year like this, I just wonder if maybe they're just going to be in a lot of uncompetitive games in the fourth quarter where they're up by 20 points. They're putting in the second unit and whatnot. But beyond that, like I'm in agreement with you with that. I'm very excited to see how Holiday is next to Giannis, and obviously Holiday should be a upgrade over Bledsoe. But I do feel like for me, the Bucks become a lot more interesting once the playoffs start.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, that's like I said, Microsoft's on the Bucks when the playoffs come because we need to see if Giannis can and Budenholzer can, get past their postseason shortcomings.
Yeah, and it's honestly it's the same reason why I don't consider the Lakers to be Super League pass. Like I'll only watch them if it's marquee matchup, close game, right?
Right.
Only because like that team I think is going to be incredibly good. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But the thing is, like I said, LeBron and AD, they're not going through 110% this season, and there's gonna be so many games where they're up big and they're just flipping water bottles on the side.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, that was a ding. Yep.
but another team you bring up, actually, I'm gonna talk about two teams that you brought up because these teams are, and they're the two teams from the kind of the Northwest, the Blazers and the Nuggets, because I feel like these are two teams that could definitely go either direction, right? Like they could really be contenders, or they could maybe potentially underwhelm relative to expectations. And yet, despite that, I think both of those teams are going to be really fun teams to watch. I'm curious between the two, like, let me ask you, like, what do you think is going to be the big thing that draws you to each of those teams in terms of just watching for entertainment?
Yeah, that's great. So for the Blazers, I mean, who else do we start with? Damian Lillard, just you want to see him just chucking like shots from half to half court logo. Just you just want to see him keep extending his range. I mean, he's just an amazing dynamic player. I want to see him just he was in the bubble. He was just wrecking like the defenses like all over the court. So that's why I'm excited to see the Blazers. And they have some key pieces off season, Covington and Derrick Jones Jr. to upgrade their wing spot. So I'm just to see if their defense improves. But Damian Lillard is really the reason why I'm so attracted to this team. I mean, because he truthfully is to me an NBA candidate, and maybe the best point guard under I guess 6'4" in the league. And then the Nuggets, I mean, I love watching Jokic too. Just watching him like facilitate and just make plays on the below post. But even more than that, I mean, we all know how dynamic Jamal Murray was in the bubble. I think he really showed himself, showed everyone why he's ascending a superstar. And I want to see him build on a performance. I want to see him continue to elevate his game because when we saw him, but when he's on fire, like man, I don't know what to say. It's just you just gotta sit back and enjoy it. So that's my rundown.
No, I'm certainly in agreement with you there. I'm also really curious to see if there's another leap left in, or not another leap. I'm curious to see what improvement we get out of Michael Porter Jr. since Jeremy Grant's gone and no longer in Denver. There should be, and
Yep,
Mason
for
Plumlee.
sure.
There's going to be more minutes for Michael Porter Jr., who at times looked really good, and at sometimes, he was a rookie and may have had some rookie woes, but. Um, I'm glad you brought up Dame because I feel like he is one of the last. I'm talking amongst. I feel like he is one of. I think like there's a chance that Dame during this regular season he could approach that like 2015, 2016 Steph Curry level where like if he gets hot, like it doesn't matter who the opponent is, doesn't matter what the lead is, what the deficit is, like you want to tune in, and I'm very curious to see if he can kind of keep that up, keep up that momentum that he had from last season. Because like you said, he was incredible in Orlando. He was also very good in the regular season as well. And just a quick before we kind of move on to the next kind of group of teams. I will say one game where I'm absolutely ready to get my popcorn is for when the Clippers play the Blazers.
Oh man, yes, that's just facts. I mean, we saw the exchange between Paul George and Damian Lillard after that one game in the bubble.
Yep.
And I
And
don't
Pat
think we need to
Bev.
go further into that. And
Yeah.
Beverly, of course, yeah.
And Beverly, and Marcus Morris, if I recall correctly,
Yeah,
was getting in on it.
he was just messing around with Beverly on the bench when Dame Lillard missed the free throws, I think. Yeah, he was definitely involved. I don't think he was on social media, but he was
Yeah, yeah.
involved in. Yeah.
But I'll end by saying this. Um, I would imagine that maybe at some point, like Paul George stops, these no shows in these big moments or having to kind of swallow his words. But I will say this: if he just gets absolutely embarrassed by Dame again, even if it's the regular season, I just don't know if the internet can handle it.
Oh man, yeah. I'm excited to see how Paul George performs on that stage.
But anyhow, enough with the Paul George talk. Moving on to the next group of teams. So this next group of teams, kind of that middle class of the NBA, where the way I would kind of define it is teams that expect to make the playoffs, but realistically, I think the fan bases don't expect a championship this year, right? I think you think of, as an example, you think of like the Washington Wizards, you think of the Phoenix Suns, right? And so forth. My first question to you actually is: do you consider the Mavs to be in this group? Because if you do, I feel like they're the easy answer for this kind of group of teams.
Well, first of all, I think the Mavs should be considered among the contenders. I don't. I think they're. I mean, I think they're easily a playoff team. But I think we should start talking about them in terms of their championship aspirations, sooner rather than later, because they have probably the one best players in the world, Luka Doncic, just a rising MVP candidate. Now I know Porzingis is going to be out to like maybe January, and that might maybe hurt them in the start of the season. Always his health is always going to be a question mark. But I mean, when you have Luka on your team, like you're not talking club expectations. You're talking like maybe championship contention. Maybe not this season, but I mean, yeah, maybe not this season, but maybe the next season after that. So I think I might just place Mavs between like the top tier and maybe the second tier. That's where I'm placing them.
Sure. Okay.
But
Yeah. So with that in mind, kind of what are some teams that certainly that you would say catch your eye that fit that description?
playoff expectations. So you mentioned the Suns and Wizards earlier, and I would put them among that group too. I also want to mention the Hawks, the Pelicans, and the Grizzlies among those teams as well.
Yeah. Okay. Um, okay. Hawks, Pelicans, Grizzlies. Of those teams, which of those do you think is likely to potentially underwhelm?
Underwhelm. Okay, that's a good question. Um, I mean, you could give reasons for like four out of five of these teams. I guess maybe the Grizzlies or the Hawks. I would say, and I mean, I don't want to cut the Wizards out too because I can go into them later. But I'd say maybe the Grizzlies or Hawks. I don't know which one of these teams I would pick one or other. But and I guess the reason I would say to them is because Hawks obviously made some big signs in the offseason. They added Gallinari, Bogdanovic, Rondo, and Chris Dunn. They drafted Kongwu, so they greatly improved their depth. The thing is, like, there's not a lot of love, like really high level defenders on the team, like not like elite defenders, and like there's people there's players, the best players on the team have their defensive shortcomings. So Trey obviously that's been talked about enough. I mean, Bogdanovic is not that great on defense. Dan Gallinari has a deficiency on defense, so I think they're gonna score like 125 points a game, 130 points a game. But I want to see if their defense improves. And as for Grizzlies, Jaren Jackson Jr. is gonna be out for like I think the first month of the season. That might hurt them a bit. And then now I think somebody talked about this like on their podcast I listened to, but it's like last year didn't have expectations. So when they almost made the playoffs, it's like that was a great season for them. But now they have expectations. So it's like you wonder if there's players other than Ja that might that you want to see step up. So I mean, Murray, I have no issue with him. I think he's going to be a fantastic player. But now that you have the expectations, around them, and I want to see how they perform. And I also mentioned the Wizards in passing, and that's I think there's the two reasons are first, like I don't like I'm a fan of them obviously, but I don't know how much they improved defensively. And they were the worst defensive team last year, I think, according to metrics. And secondly, I'm not high on Scott Brooks whatsoever. I think, I don't think he's a bad guy at all, but I don't think he really caps the ceiling of this team. I think he's not at best like I don't I think we can contend for playoffs, but I don't really feel great beyond that because I don't really feel like he inspires the team enough. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's let go like during or after the season.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
that was a lot. So just I'm
Yeah,
gonna let you
no,
process all that.
no. So I certainly agree with you. I mean, at the end of the day, these are all teams that you can see in the playoffs, but you could also see maybe being the 9 seed in the play-in and then losing to the 8 seed or whatever, right? Um, what I do think is a very common theme that you see, at least among these teams that you just listed, right? The Pelicans, the Wizards, the Hawks, and the Grizzlies, is that these teams are going to put up a lot more points than they're going to get stops. And I think to me, that is a formula for fun regular season basketball that is high scoring, has a good flow to it, and is competitive, right? Like those that fourth quarter 120 to 118 type thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that really seems to be the theme among the Wizards, Hawks, Pelicans, and Grizzlies because, you know, um, the Pelicans are going to be a sort of high-paced team. They got Stan McGoldney. They added Adams, so they might improve defensively. And yeah, this is going to be some fun, entertaining games. But again, you want to see them, take the next step because that's easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, moving on, or not moving on, but talking about another team that we mentioned, the Suns, right? I think the Suns are also going to be fun to watch. I think they have the potential to be better on defense. Like, I mean, just I think that they have a little more defensive minded personnel, especially with now the additions of Chris Paul and Jay Crowder, and you know they have a defensive minded coach. I think in Monty Williams. Um, my question is, what do you see as the best case scenario for the Suns? Like a realistic best case. Like obviously, like is it they quote unquote can win the championship, but like realistically, like what do you think is like one of the better kind of scenarios for the Suns with regards to seeding?
I think the best case scenario for realistically could be a fourth and fifth seed. I think they have the talent under at least in their starting lineup to get that accomplished. I mean that Chris Paul. There's enough. We said enough about him. Devin Booker could make another leap. Maybe even an All-NBA appearance. You never know. I mean, like now he has Chris Paul feeding the ball, so it's even easier for him to score. Mikal Bridges took a step last year. He's already one of the best defensive stoppers in the league. I'm curious to see how much he adds to his offensive repertoire. Jay Crowder was a very key sign for them. He was a key clock on defense for the Heat last year in their playoff run. He did shoot a high percentage from three, though usually he's kind of 34%. So I want to see if he doesn't see if he regresses or not. Ayton, I mean, I obviously people are going to talk about Luka was in the third pick and all that, but Ayton's been he made another took a step last year, especially defensively. First of all, he had another legitimate point guard feeding the ball, so it's easier for him to score. And then he made strides on defense as well. So now I want to see him, take another step, become like an annual 2010 guy. And they still have Cam Johnson, who is also a sharpshooter from the bench. So there's the talent pieces are there to make possibly a run to, I guess, the fourth or fifth seed in the West.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you there, and I think this is a team that is definitely, regardless of how they do in the regular season, I think they're a team that is going to play a lot of exciting games, but also still be like respectable on both sides of the ball, right? Like, and obviously that helps when you have a floor general like Chris Paul, and then a superstar, a young superstar in Devin Booker, and then a potential superstar all star in big man and who's very young in DeAndre Ayton. So yeah, I certainly will be watching a fair bit of Suns games, which I haven't been able to say for a couple of years. So that's definitely good. Uh, I guess moving on to the last and the most interesting, I shouldn't say most interesting category, but the dumpster fire category, which is just teams that realistically we think are bound for the lottery, but we're still going to watch because we think they'll be, like I said, league pass. What are some teams that come to mind that you may not think are particularly good or likely to do well in the regular season, but you think you'll be sucked into their games?
Yeah, so the five teams I chose are Hornets, which I guess for obvious reasons, the Bulls, the Kings, the Wolves, and the Thunder. So I'm curious which of these teams you're intrigued by.
Before you touch on that, that reminds me. Where do you put the Warriors in these? Like, where do you think the Warriors fan base expectation should be?
I think they should be, playoff bound. I mean, they still have Steph Curry. I think now you're going to see him fully unleashed, and he's the top five player in the league when he's healthy. So that gives him a fighting chance, or not necessarily a fighting chance, but it certainly gives them, playoff expectations. They added Oubre to trade. He's really burgeoning into one very solid young wing, and we're curious to see what Wiggins does. Although let's not get our hopes too high on that. And they added James Wiseman to the draft, so I think he has one of the highest floors among prospects. So I'm curious to see how he does. Yeah, they should easily. I mean, maybe like I could see like an eighth seed, in the horizon, but they should be playoff bound.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm definitely just excited to see. Hopefully, knock on wood. I'm excited to see a healthy Steph Curry play basketball once again. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that they should they should have playoff expectations. Obviously, when Clay goes down, you don't quite have those title expectations. But yeah, so I'm with you there. Back to these kind of like lottery bound teams. So you said what the Bulls, the Hornets, um, and who else did you rattle off?
The Kings, the Wolves, and the Thunder.
Okay. So I think the Hornets are a very obvious pick because they have LaMelo Ball and they have some nice young pieces. And even though LaMelo Ball is going to have some nights where he really struggles from the field, he's going to have a lot of oohs and ahs with regards to his highlight reel, right? PJ Washington is also a nice player. I've said this for a little bit. Those LaMelo alley oops to Miles Bridges are going to be real exciting. So I'm with you there. So we don't need to talk too much about that. I'm curious. Tell me, beyond Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and the fact that there's a lot of young players, like what are you expecting from OKC? Because by most most people expect them to be at the bottom of the West. Well, I'm curious, kind of what's your expectation for what will draw you into these OKC games?
Yeah, I mean, what would draw me in is just how I guess it's what you said. How like say he goes out of general performance in his third year. Now he's the guy on a team now. So I'm very curious to see like how he does against like teams that legit like just gameplay on him. There's Lou Dortz, other young guys that they drafted Pokuševski on Maladon. So I want to see how they perform. And my expectations for them, I think they start off like I think they start off okay-ish, like maybe around 500, like the first 10 games or so, just because they still have some veterans on their team like Ariza, Horford, and Hill that could keep them like treading water for a bit. But then once they ship those players off for for more assets, then I think that's when you see those leader play tail off like a lot more and maybe finish near the bottom of the West like you're expected to. So, but I mean, SGA is like I know you wanted other reasons in, but he's really the reason why. Like I'm sad, I'm curious to see him just because I was pretty high on him pre-draft, and he showed me a lot for his first two seasons. He's really validated my expectations for him the first two seasons, just being that like herky jerky, like uh, quirky type of scorer. So he's an interesting game. So I'm excited to see that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, he's obviously one of the exciting young players in the league to watch. I have two follow-up questions. The first being if if you think there's a chance, OKC initially is kind of treading above water, who do you envision as the worst team in the West? And then my second question is there a chance where this year's Thunder team actually kind of ends up being a little bit like last year's Thunder team and also the 13-14 Suns from the standpoint of a lot of young pieces and a couple of veterans, and everyone thinks that they're just going to be a dumpster fire, but they end up actually being well coached and actually kind of pretty competitive. So curious for your thoughts on those 2 points.
Yeah, so to answer your first question, I think the worst team in the West has a chance to be either the Sacramento Kings or the Wolves, which are two teams I also mentioned. The reason I say this is because, I mean, the Kings, they did add they let Bogdanovich go. They did that hybrid in which was most people say it's a big steal for them. I'm excited to see him play, but I think their coach Luke Walton kind of holds them back. I was very curious as to why they went away from playing a fast-paced game, a slow-paced game that didn't really suit De'Aaron Fox's game. Um, so that's one candidate for worst team in the West. Other candidate is the Wolves, which I said. I think it's just because I don't really see there's just too many one-dimensional players on the team, especially offensively.
Yep.
Like D'Angelo Russell, Carney Towns, their new draft pick, Andy Edwards, Malik Beasley too. They're all offense-oriented, but I don't. There's just no evidence of them being even serviceable on defense. Derek Culver, he showed some defensive chops last year, but offensively it was a mighty struggle for him. He just couldn't really get any going from there at all. And Koji too, again, he's good offensively, but offensively he's kind of a black hole. He's just kind of like the spot shooter that teams just leave alone. So, and I'm not really high on Ryan Saunders that much either. Just I think it's kind of the same reason Scott Brooks. It doesn't seem like he inspires his players as much, as cliche as it sounds. So those are my two picks for possible worst teams other than Thunder in the West. And then your second question is maybe they maybe exceed expectations, become like kind of a fun, I guess, kind of like a 13-14 Suns team version to watch. I don't know if I give them that high of a chance of them achieving that, because I think Presti, just based on how Presti is like handling this offseason, he seems hell bent on trying to trade away the veterans on team, just Hill, Ariza, and Horford, and just trying to collect assets and just trying to bottom out. So I don't think the chances they're that are too high. It's just especially it's because there's so many teams in West that are contending for a playoff spot, or Chris trying to contend for a playoff spot. So I don't think that's very high.
Yeah, okay. I do wonder if there maybe is that potential, but I wouldn't bet on it, certainly, right? But I hear you, and regarding the point about Luke Walton, I just think it's so ironic that the Kings had Dave Yeager, and Dave Yeager was always known for slowing it down, playing this very methodical and slow tempo. And then he comes to Sacramento and he overachieves because he changes it up. And then they bring in Luke Walton, who was obviously the coach he was assistant at Golden State, and then played more up tempo in LA as the coach of the Lakers. And then when he comes to the Kings, all of a sudden he's slowing it down. So that's definitely really head scratching. I just find that kind of interesting that it seems like when the Kings hire someone, they go away from what they normally do.
Right, and I mean, maybe that's why they haven't made a playoffs in 14 years, among many other reasons, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's the West is an absolute gauntlet this year, but we'll see. Like and we've talked about this before, but I really feel like there's most of the front offices in the West genuinely like are trying to make the playoffs this year. I think the only team that is kind of openly saying like, you know what, we're fine with, this being a developmental year. I think the only team that has that expectation really is OKC.
For sure, yeah. Every team in the playoff in the West has playoff aspirations. So
yeah,
there's going to be teams that won't make it. So
right, yeah. And I mean, there's going to be, if you consider the play-in as making the playoffs, that means there's going to be only 4 teams that probably expect to make the playoffs that won't make the playoffs. So I'm definitely fascinated to see which teams end up in that bucket. Last question that I have before I let you go. If you can only watch one team in the regular season, like you basically, if let's say you were only allowed to watch one team and then all the games they played in the regular season, which team are you taking? So essentially the league pass MVP.
Yeah, so I mean, other than Wizards games, which I'll obviously watch because I'm a fan. Uh, wow, that's a good question. I might really, I might go for the Suns. Like I'm just so curious to see how the Chris Paul, Devin Booker, backwards is going to gel. I mean, Devin Booker is like he's one of my favorite players to watch in the league just because of his ability to just score from anywhere on the court, and just that how efficiently he's been able to score just the past. No, he's really just improved his shot selection the past like few seasons. He's taking away like some of those like deep bombs from like threes. He's taking more, comfortable mid-range shots, which I like for him. So I mean, this is the first time the Suns have been exciting since 10 years ago, since Steve Nash led them to the Western Conference Finals. Honestly, so I'm excited to watch them.
Yeah, honestly, that might have been my pick too. Because if you think about it, the Suns, just because of the division they're in, they're gonna play some of the good teams like more often, right? So you factor that in too, and obviously, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and a lot of young pieces. I think they might also be the league pass team of the year. So, yeah, I certainly can get behind that. But we've been chatting about 30 minutes. I don't want to keep you on too long, so I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So thanks for joining me again, Andrew.
Yeah, for sure, man. You too. Take care.
You too. And to the listeners that if you haven't done so already, please subscribe on whatever medium you're listening to, whether it's Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or YouTube. Once again, thanks for listening, and thank you, Andrew, for joining me.